everyone. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Gibbons, and I'm the co-director of the Wisconsin-Minnesota Comprehensive Center and the director of the Center for Applied Research and Educational Improvement at the University of Minnesota. On behalf of the WMCC leadership team, we'd like to welcome you and thank you for attending our webinar on Rural School District Collaboratives for Shared Services. This topic is of particular interest to me as I spent the first 20 years of my career at the St. Croix River Education District here in Minnesota, which is a collaborative of 6 school districts in East Central Minnesota. I was the director of special ed and the executive director throughout my tenure. And what I learned through that experience was really the value of cooperation and collaboration, and how doing that really intentionally can result in increases in student outcomes. Through collaboration and collaboration, we can share resources and expertise and really build collective excellence across the collaborative. I also learned that it's not just about saving money, that we can really focus through sharing and collaborating on improving services, not just expanding services. And by doing that, we're able to really improve the resources that are available to all students, and we can do more with either the same or less resources. So the WMCC our mission is really simple. It's to aim to improve the academic achievement of both elementary and secondary school students in our 2-state region by building capacity and advancing the use of evidence-based practices. We have 3 partner organizations within the Wisconsin-Minnesota Comprehensive Center. The first is the University of Wisconsin-Madison, Wisconsin Evaluation Collaborative, WEC. Second is the University of Minnesota Center for Applied Research and Educational Improvement. And the third, also from Wisconsin, is Education Analytics. So again, welcome, and I'm going to toss it over to Brad Carl from WEC to get us started.
Hey, can I interrupt real quick? I'm just getting a bunch of emails from the people that got kicked out. So I'm going to resend them my link so they can get back in because they were removed, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Brad.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brad Carl. I am one of the co-directors of the Wisconsin Evaluation Collaborative. We are housed within the Wisconsin Center for Education Research, which is part of the School of Education here at UW-Madison. On the previous slide was quickly like to invite you to take a minute to follow us on LinkedIn. There is information about the Comp Center that you can find that, thank you, Molly, that is in the that is also in the chat as well. So let's see. So you've already met Kim Gibbons. So what I want to do next is just introduce quickly the participants, the panelists, and the superintendents and our discussants who will be leading us through today's conversation. They will also have a chance to introduce themselves as well, but I wanted to introduce them, first start with introducing a couple of my colleagues. So you've already met Kim Gibbons, who is one of the co-directors of the Region 10 Wisconsin-Minnesota Comprehensive Center. Kim Gibbons is also the executive director of CARI at the University of Minnesota. Alicia Mutri is the other co-director on the Wisconsin side of the Comprehensive Center. And I would also just like to introduce a couple of my colleagues who are providing technical support to the webinar today. Molly Carroll is a research associate here at WEC, and Bree Chapa is a data scientist here at WEC. So I would like to just thank them for all of the support that they've put into the planning and organization for today's webinar. Thank you, guys. So next, I want to just introduce quickly our superintendent panelists from Minnesota and from Wisconsin. And again, these folks will be speaking later on and we'll have a chance to introduce themselves. But first, from the Itasca Area Schools Collaborative in Minnesota, Matt Gross is the superintendent of Independent School District 318, which is located in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. Matt is also the past executive director of the Itasca Area Schools Collaborative. Excuse me. Would also like to introduce Pat Rendell, who is superintendent of 2 districts in Minnesota, 2 rural districts, Independent District 2 in Hill City and 118 in Northland. And Pat is also the current executive director of the Itasca Area Schools Collaborative. And also on this slide, you can see here, the Itasca Area Schools Collaborative is a consortium of districts in the northern part of Minnesota, and the member districts, the member school districts, along with their partner, the Itasca Community College, are all listed here on this slide. So moving next to our Wisconsin panelists, representing the Trempealeau Valley Cooperative, which you can see on the map here is comprised of 4 districts that are located in west central Wisconsin. We have the superintendent of the Arcadia School District, Lance Bagstead. Mike Begley is the superintendent of the Whitehall School District. Barry Schmidt is superintendent of Independence School District. And Jeff Eide is the superintendent of the Blair Taylor School District. Again, all located in west central Wisconsin. And then we're very pleased to have as part of today's webinar, our 2 rural education advocacy organizations that represent rural schools in our 2 states. In Wisconsin, Kim Cockle is the executive director of the Wisconsin Rural Schools Alliance. And in Minnesota, we're pleased to have Bob Indahar, who is the executive director of the Minnesota Rural Education Association. Okay, so with that in mind, let's see, I'm going to turn it over to Molly Carroll, who's going to give a few business rules about attendee participation today.
All right. Welcome, everyone. There is a Q&A tab for you to use. So if you have questions, as the preset questions progress, you can feel free to enter those. We may address your question in some of our preset questions. Your questions will be visible to everyone on the webinar unless you choose to send them anonymously. Another thing that you could do is like other people's questions. If someone asked a question that you also had, that would be a way that we could get a sense of which questions were most popular. I'll be feeding the preset questions into the chat as we go, so that either as an attendee or as a panelist, if you want to refer back to what the question was, that should be available in the chat. We'll be opening up the chat for everyone once we have we're going to go into that more open Q&A portion after the preset questions. So that would be a time when you could chat someone if you wanted to make a connection or ask a question that way. We also have a survey at the end. It's very brief, but it really would help us plan for future webinars. So if you could take a moment and fill out that evaluation for us as attendees, that would really help us continue to reflect and improve on what we're doing in planning these webinars. So thanks so much. And I think I'll pass it back to Brad.
Okay, thanks, Molly. Next, we want to just briefly introduce our 3 goals for today's webinar. Our first goal is to understand the context for shared service collaboratives that exist among rural school districts. Our second objective is to highlight 2 homegrown examples, one from each of our states that are served by the Region 10 Comprehensive Center that are doing some work in this space, rural shared service collaboratives. And then our third objective is to give you, the audience, some ways of getting some more information if you have questions or want to learn more beyond what we talk about in today's webinar. We'll leave you with a chance, some opportunities for how to get more information. So next thing I want to do is just briefly preview our agenda. I'll start for the next couple of minutes, just talk a little bit about, give a little background, a little context for why rural shared service collaboratives are important, an important feature of the education landscape in our 2 states. I will introduce our panelists again and give them a chance really to talk about their work, introduce themselves and who they are. And then I will be facilitating a moderated discussion with our panelists where we'll walk through some questions that will give you a sense of the work that the two collaboratives do and let them expound on that in greater detail. And then the final thing that we'll be doing toward the end is give the audience members a chance to pose some questions for our panelists, which include our two collaboratives as well as our discussants who are from the two rural education associations in our states. So that's our agenda for today. I'd like to start here with a few slides, a few thoughts to just kind of set the stage for this topic, rural shared service collaboratives in our two states. So one thing that our two states have in common, and Minnesota and Wisconsin have many characteristics in common in terms of the education landscape. One of these things is a high number of rural districts. And in Wisconsin, of our 421 school districts, not including independent charter schools, 236 or 56.1% of our districts in Wisconsin are classified as rural, according to the National Center for Education Statistics. In Minnesota, that number is even a little higher. 200 out of 332 districts in Minnesota, or a little over 60%, are rural. So clearly, the takeaway here: lots of rural districts in our two states. Rural districts clearly have significant assets and resources, including but not limited to small student-teacher ratios and close relationships between families and school staff. So clearly a set of strengths, but there are also some well-documented challenges that are not new that rural districts have faced, perhaps some even more so in recent years. These include, in many cases, rural districts have flat or declining enrollment, which leads to financial challenges. High and or increasing rates of poverty are certainly a feature for many rural districts. Internet access through broadband is well understood as a longstanding challenge that has attracted lots of attention, and I suspect our panelists may speak to this a bit. There are challenges as well for rural districts in terms of attracting and retaining staff, not just teachers, but administrators and everything in between. Rural districts often face significant challenges in terms of not being located in close proximity to health providers, both physical and mental health providers. And then one other challenge is being able to keep up with course offerings, and particularly in an age where college and career readiness are emphasized. And this is a topic that you'll be hearing about again from our panelists. So with that brief context in mind, wanted to there are many, go back one more slide. There are many examples of rural districts that have joined together in our two states to provide services and costs. These are typically seen in areas such as special education, school administration, infrastructure, which includes transportation and supplies, et cetera, and some instructional services. Specifics vary a lot by state, not just with our two states, but across the country. And go ahead to the next slide. There are lots of examples. I want to make clear that what we're highlighting in today's webinar is only just a couple of examples. In Wisconsin, we have CESAs, our cooperative educational service agencies. Minnesota has service cooperatives, education districts, special ed service cooperatives. So many examples of rural shared service collaboratives. So we're just highlighting a couple of them here, but definitely want to give a nod to all of the work that's being done beyond the two examples we're highlighting today. So with the next slide, what we're going to do today is highlight two examples of smaller, what we're call homegrown collaboratives of rural districts that have joined together to address specific challenges in their local context. Again, we acknowledge that there are lots of examples of great work that's being done in this space. One goal that we've talked about as a comp center is with our two state education agencies is potentially to develop an inventory or a repository of rural district collaboratives that could get updated with some frequency. So we have some, that is a potential goal for, when today's webinar is concluded. Okay, So with that in mind, we're ready to launch into our moderated discussion here. In this next section, what I will be doing is I will tee up a question that our panelists will respond to. We'll have one response from on behalf of the Trempealeau Trempealeau Valley Cooperative and one response on behalf of the Itasca Group. So the first question is, if you could just please provide a brief overview and history of your collaborative, featuring things like who are your partners, when were you formed, and what were the main problems and challenges that your collaborative was formed in order to address. So I'll direct the first part on behalf of the Trempealeau Valley Cooperative. Mike, I think you're taking this one.
I am, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. As was stated earlier, my name is Mike Bigley. I'm the superintendent of schools for the Whitehall School District. And this is year 19 here for me and year 25 overall as a rural school superintendent here in Wisconsin. And we're excited about the opportunity to share with you what we've done. The Trempealeau Valley Cooperative 2.0 is actually a reboot of a co-op that was started in 1968, if you can believe that. Back in that time frame, the actual mission was to better prepare non-college bound students for post-high school employment. So it's kind of similar, except we're really attacking things on a broader scale than that. Early in 2016, it became pretty evident that in our area of the state, we were struggling on many levels. We have some tremendous employment opportunities in our area. I'm sure most of you have heard or seen Ashley Furniture. Their home is in Arcadia. They had a plant in Whitehall as well. They were having a tremendously difficult time securing enough workers to keep those plants viable at a time when consumer-driven economies were like no other time in our history. So that created some needs for us. They began to grow their own. So again, the co-op piece of this for us is our 4 schools: the Arcadia School District, Whitehall Memorial Schools, Blair Taylor School District, and Independence. And then we have partnerships established with Western Technical College and, as I mentioned, Ashley Furniture. And the reason I bring them up right now is again, I started to explain, we needed to meet our needs of our employers in our region if our region was going to stay viable. So back in 2016, we started that conversation about how can we do better. Much like Kim shared in the opening, we're not looking at saving money. We're not looking at repurposing or repackaging the same things. And the environment we were all in was real competitive for students. And that's not something that's going to allow us to be successful as a region. So we created a broad discussion. We got our 4 school boards together after a large number of conversations with our superintendents, and created a mission statement for the new Trempealeau Valley Cooperative, which was, we will be a world-class collaborative educational system in a rural setting. And that sounds great. And then of course, Future Ready took over, and Lance and I like to laugh a lot because we started using that term well before it was a national buzzword, that there was no way to define exactly what the future was going to hold. But as we really got into the discussion, we talked a lot about the need for regional stability and growth. And a lot of that gets well outside our purview as a school, as rural schools or as school districts, but no one else was able to do it at this point. So we really came up with some key components that would guide our work. And you'll hear more about that as what it actually looks like. Regional stability and growth, recruiting and retaining staff, attracting people and retaining people in our area, in our region, and truly creating a regional focus in terms of our decision making. And as you would expect, that brings some challenges with it at times. Establishing meaningful partnerships. As I mentioned, we have Ashley Furniture. They've been a tremendous partner for us. Western Technical College has been great. Chippewa Valley Technical College has been great. We have established partnerships with Gateway, with Fox Valley. And then UW Stout is our primary 4-year university partner at this point. But our work really targeted that regional perspective in a different thought process. is we cannot continue to duplicate everything every 8 miles. It's not an efficient model by any stretch of the imagination. So we really targeted those things. And, you know, as I mentioned, or as you would all assume, based on your own experiences, rural America was struggling and continues to struggle. The pandemic certainly has shown us that if there ever is a time for rural America to rebirth itself, it's now. But if we continue to think in spirals or in silos, excuse me, we continue to think about only our own little communities or our own school districts, that's not heading anywhere for us. So that's the general overview in the history. So we did have the luxury when we recreated the co-op that most of our residents in this area knew what it was. Many of them had attended school here, had seen the co-op, had taken classes in different schools. So it was really an easy sell that way. We just renamed it and moved forward. So I think, guys from Wisconsin, if there's anything I missed, but that's the general overview, and we'll keep as much time as we can for question and answers.
Okay, excellent, Mike. Thanks for the overview. Matt, we'll turn it over to you to give an overview of Itasca.
Good morning, everyone. Again, Matt Gross, Superintendent in Grand Rapids. I've had the unique chance to work even on a temporary basis in 4 of the schools that I'm going to talk about, or districts I've talked about. Our collaborative has an interesting history too, kind of like Mike's, dating back a while. In 1987, a group of districts in higher ed was approached by a local telephone company to purchase some fiber. And at that time in 1987, if you think about what high-speed fiber was being used for, nobody really even knew what it was. But fortunately, the leaders at the time said yes, and a collaborative was formed that brought together a number of school districts as well as the community college. And that was in 1987. And it rebooted, I'll use Mike's word, in around 2005, and became the Itasca Area Schools Collaborative. And you saw the map on that introduction screen. We're sitting in north central Minnesota, like you saw. On the east end, you have the Iron Range, which has a long history of supporting our country with the production of iron and steel. Very strong union area of the country. And then on the west end, we're sort of bordered by the Leech Lake Indian Reservation. And our districts in the west side of our group of districts have higher indigenous demographics, and so that creates some awesome opportunities and uniqueness too. Our districts vary in size, and if you saw the size of that patch in general, our districts put together cover about 3,500 square miles. We're bigger than Delaware and smaller than Connecticut, but it's a huge geographical area. My district itself in Grand Rapids here covers about 2,000 square miles. So geography, density or lack thereof of students is a challenge for us, and something we have to work around consistently. Our districts range in size. In Grand Rapids, where I am, we're the largest district, about 4,000 students. And we have one of our districts, Northland Community, around 350, Deer River, just south of 1,000, right around 900. Greenway's about 1,000, Nashwauk-Keewatin's about 600. Floodwood has a little less than 200. Hill City's right around 200. And then our community college partner, Itasca, has about 1,000. So ranging in size from 200 to 4,000 creates some really unique conversations and interests and apprehensions. Sometimes we've been very intentional about the biggest district's role in leadership in the collaborative. So people in our community or people within the district don't see this as a way for the big dog to swallow up everyone. So our leadership has been really careful about, how we're structured. There have been a number of iterations over time. I mentioned 1987 and in 2005, that, the goal in 87 was really about credit recovery. We were sharing classes via ITV through the fisheye lens cameras of the time very ineffectively. And in 2005, it was about sharing services and saving money. That all the districts were hurting financially at the time. And it was about how do we share things. So that brought some things together around business services and administration. And then in 2010, there was, I would say, the IASK 2.0, where we really said we need to do better by our kids. We need to focus on teaching and learning, take advantage of technologies that were emerging. And in between then, we had co-developed a supplemental online learning program kind of before it was cool. And that's grown today to include over 40 school districts in the state of Minnesota and about 1,000 students. In 2010, it's interesting to talk about this now, sharing classes via video, because everybody does that like we're doing on this call. But in 2010, it wasn't happening a great deal. And we launched into some immersive technology where we were sharing classes around that were specifically about high need, low teacher supply, low student density, so we could combine 2 or 3 kids from each of our classes into a one course taught by one teacher via distance. And what was different and unique about that is, in terms of some of the approaches that we've taken, is that we really started with this idea of our why. Why would we do this? What was important? And that led to some change. We've had some things that haven't gone well, and this is probably in a lesson learned section later, but really when we've not started with purpose, we've struggled to kind of maintain efficacy over time. In terms of problems and challenges that we face, I think our focus is about how do we provide the greatest opportunity for all students in the region, regardless of zip code, especially in a huge geographical, even a political, diverse kind of a region. But we've proven that when we work together, when we think creatively, we've been able to do better for kids. And we just have to sort of leave our notions at the door and focus on purpose. And we've been able to do that. We've been able to get some great things done. Let's see, I think that's it for my question number 1.
Okay, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Matt, for the overview. Our next question, we want to pivot a little bit and talk about the organizational structure and a little bit about how you actually get your work done as a collaborative. So the question is as follows: how does your collaborative operate? And you can talk about things including but not limited to your leadership and how that's determined, and your structure and your funding and how you make decisions as a collaborative. So we will I'll have Pat speak on behalf of IASK first, and then Lance will speak on behalf of the Trempealeau Valley Co-op.
All right, well, thank you very much. I'm going to answer this question, but I'm going to acquiesce to my partner, Matt, as if there's anything I missed in my discussion, because I'm new to the executive director position. And Matt's, as you just heard, is quite the historian of what's been happening there. He's been there so long. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lump the leadership and the structure and the decision-making kind of into one category. One of the things that has happened with us is Matt was talking about 1.0, 2.0. I'm not sure what we would call this, if we call this 3.0, but we went through an operational strategic plan starting at the beginning of the year, and it was just completed last month, because we got to a pivotal point in our collaborative where Matt was just referring to, where what's our why, what's our direction. I think Matt, when we first started this, I always like to talk about the money part, because when we first started it, I think there was like a $1.5 million commitment. Now our budget's at over $7 million commitment. Is that accurate, Matt, would you say? Yeah, and so you can see that in and of itself then would just lead to us having to sort of look again at how we do business. And one of the things that came out of the strategic plan, I think what I'll do is I'll talk about ideally how we want to set up our leadership structure. So we had a meeting last night, and our meeting last night started that process. So part of that process was our board of directors used to meet quarterly. We have an AC committee, which is our administrative committee, which was our superintendents. We met once a month. And the timing didn't always work out when we wanted to make decisions one way or another, and we couldn't get board approval and so on. So one of the things that came out of our strategic plan was to start to operate more like a traditional Minnesota school district. So what we did last night was we have a board of directors, and that board of directors is a school board member and an alternate from each of our districts. We have an AC committee, which is a superintendent from each of our districts. And at last night's operational meeting, organizational meeting, we set up that our board of directors now will look more like a school district's school board. We set up a monthly meeting schedule rather than a quarterly meeting schedule. And then we took my role, which in the past was sort of the board chair of the board of directors, and we've turned that into more of what a superintendent would do in advising a traditional board. So now our board has a board chair, which is a board member. Everybody on there is from a school board, part of the board of directors, and now they're running the meetings and so on. And then our AC committee. So in other words, we have a board of directors, which are board members. Then we have our AC committee, which are the soups. And then we have an executive director, which right now would be me, that would work just like a superintendent would, working with a traditional board. When we talk about the funding part of it, basically right now, all of our schools get charged to be part of the club. You pay per pupil, and it's the same. So when Matt goes back to talking about his district, always one of the concerns always is, I think, with the larger district is, why are we doing this? We're footing a big part of the bill, and Matt can chime in on this if he has opinions about it. And then you have the smaller districts. I represent 2 of the 3 smallest districts. Even sometimes we are wondering why we're involved. It's hard to convince my boards sometimes that we need to be part of the club too. But at the same time, so that's how we fund it. We also have we have this wonderful partner in Blandon who not only funds, they're a partner that funds our early childhood programming, which is a big part of our collaborative we can talk about in a little bit. And then they also, right now, we have this Career Pathways initiative, and they're a huge partner in that. So I look forward to reading it in a second, but when Wisconsin group talked about Ashley Furniture being a partner, I asked, what was that role? Because we're looking right now at what we can do to, I think if you're not growing, you're dying, and we want to grow. And when I saw that you had a business partner as part of your collaborative, I thought that was super interesting. So I'm looking forward to reading the response here. But that's pretty much how we're funded. One of the things that we're looking at as we sort of restructure what we're doing is we want to hire now an executive director whose sole purpose is to look over our collaborative and grow this collaborative, and then get a support staff working with them. Right now, what we have is that we have somebody like Matt, who used to, at one time, Matt was running 2 big districts and running this. I'm running 2 small districts and doing this. We want somebody that's going to just do this. And then we have a Deer River district that handles the HR and all the business office stuff of it. And we want to pull all that under one umbrella, and then solidify our group, and then grow. Hire somebody that's going to have it grow. Because I think that there's a lot of, what's going to be fun is to hear what Wisconsin's doing, because there's a lot of areas where I think we could really work hard for our kids. The last thing I'll say, and Wisconsin just said this a second ago, and I love it, and that was this regional focus. And that's the one thing I'm super proud of being part of. And again, I'll go back to Matt and the founders of this collaborative. But one thing I think has been super unique with our collaborative is that we do talk about our students in the region. Matter of fact, last night at our board of directors meeting, we literally had people say, we want our kids to be proud, not only to graduate from their school, but to graduate from programs that were supported by IASC. And I thought that was pretty cool, because we don't always hear that when other groups want to sort of join our group or talk about how this group works. That's the piece, the foundation piece. I don't know who started it. Again, Matt's my mentor, so I always refer to Matt on everything. But that's I'm sure that was a part of it. But this group really does think about everybody. All of our kids, And Grand Rapids does worry about Hill City. Hill City does want to be partners with Deer River and all our schools. So I think that answers my portion of that question. Matt, did I miss anything?
Okay, thanks, Pat. Lance, do you want to talk a little bit about the operations side of the Trempealeau Valley Co-op?
Yeah, sure. Just by introduction again, Lance Bagsted, School District of Arcadia, District Administrator. Excuse me, actually my 4th year here, but my entire career has been in rural education. So a lot of these things I've done in different roles as well in other districts. Our setup, a little bit different than what Minnesota has. We do not have a president or an executive director for our group. Our leadership structure is really the 4 superintendents meeting nearly on a weekly basis. As many of the people on this call can imagine, things come up for all of us in small districts that have to be dealt with. So sometimes we're not able to meet. But our high school principals do meet weekly. Our curriculum directors meet nearly on a weekly basis to continue that model of growing whatever it is we're working on. Much of their work is guided, as it is in the Minnesota group, by a strategic plan that we've put together. And that strategic plan really focuses on cross-district professional learning communities. It focuses on dual credit. It focuses on career pathways. And then we also have a piece of our strategic plan on how we market our program to the students, the families, and the community. Our structure really is, we each operate as separate independent school districts. We do not have a combined budget, but we do have dollars set aside in our individual budgets to support the work of the Trempealeau Valley Co-op. We're really focused on sharing staff and students. And when I say share staff, we each hire our own staff, but students from other districts can take courses that are offered, for example, by Arcadia. Students from the other districts can come to and sign up for courses in Arcadia. And then we've got a whole structure on determining, which students can take which classes and how many sections are available. Students are counted as a resident student in their own district. So for funding purposes under the revenue limit worksheet in the state of Wisconsin, they're counted as resident students. It's not open enrollment. It's not part-time open enrollment. We do have the same school calendar. We do have the same bell schedule for our high schools. So that makes that much easier. We do have courses that are identified as TVC courses, and those are available as course requests for any student throughout the 4 high schools. And you hear me referencing high school. Most of this is really focused on offering opportunities to high school, but we really are trying to move that PLC process to our K-12. And that's part of our strategic plan over the next few years. So we have similar curriculums, similar scope and sequence, because we're so close in proximity that we often have kids moving from district to district. So the more similar we are, the better off those students are going to be as we have kids moving from district to district. I mentioned dual credit courses. We actually have 66 unique offerings for dual credit courses that students can take in our co-op. And that is a partnership between University of Wisconsin schools, some private colleges and universities in Wisconsin, and a few technical colleges that we have throughout Wisconsin that we also work with. I mentioned the funding part. We really don't exchange money to any great extent. We do have the occasional, what we call in Wisconsin, a 660301, which is a statutory number based on municipal agreements that school districts and or municipalities can enter into. I mentioned the dollars and whatnot. We each do fund our own transportation costs. So if students are traveling to another district to take a course, we do fund that transportation either by school van or school bus. But we also have an agreement that parents and kids can sign that if they want to transport themselves, they can also do that. Because as I said, we're geographically, we touch each other's districts. So there are situations where a kid may live on the border of the Blair-Taylor district, and it actually might be closer for them to drive to Blair-Taylor High School to take a class at 8 a.m. than it is to drive to Arcadia, jump on a bus and go back. So we've worked that out as well. We have what's called a joint powers agreement that guides the work that we do and guides our process. And I also mentioned the strategic plan that's become a part of that in recent years. We do have a governing board. It's 2 board members from each of the 4 school boards. So it's an 8-member governing board. We do have monthly governing board meetings where a lot of those there's not a lot of action items, but it's more updates on the strategic plan, where we're going, what we're doing. And then we have semi-annual joint board meetings. We actually have one of those coming up tonight, where we will update all of the board members on our strategic plan. We'll talk to them about the dual credits. We'll talk to them about our cross-district PLCs, our career pathways, and then also share with them where our marketing is at. I think it was Pat that mentioned it. You know, there was this point about a year ago, a little over a year ago, where we were kind of in this stuck point, if you will. And that really drove us to get back to the why for the TVC. And it really drove us to create a strategic plan to guide us with actionable items, with people that were in charge of certain things. And then it really also caused us to define the roles of the various management across our 4 districts. So what are pupil services in charge of? Our directors. What do curriculum directors do in this? What do our counselors do? What do our principals do? And then lastly, what's the role of the superintendents on a day-to-day basis in terms of that? And we really structured that with our mid-level management, if you will. And we've told them, if it has to do with policy or dollars, it needs to come to the superintendents. Otherwise, they're charged with getting the work done on a daily basis. So that's really a nutshell of how our collaborative operates. And certainly if there's questions, you know, we encourage you to go ahead and put that in the Q&A, and we'll try to answer those at the end of the webinar here. So I'll turn it back over to Brad.
Excellent. Thanks, Lance. And thanks, Pat. Our next question, I think, follows nicely from some things you've heard already. This question is as follows. What are your main successes and challenges to date? So we will start with Trempolo. Jeff, you want to take this one?
Sure. My name is Jeff Eide, superintendent for the Blair Taylor School District. Been in this school district for quite some time, had the opportunity to be in a rural school district for a long time. In this school district, I was teaching the gifted and talented. I was gifted and talented coordinator, associate principal. Then I had the opportunity to be a superintendent, work with these other 4 fine gentlemen here that are on the panel with you. Successes. I mean, you've heard Lance talk a little bit about our successes in the aspect of the governing board. We felt really good about how to get 28 superintendent or board members together to really discuss what that should look like. Contract written, agreed upon, real great success there. Mike tapped into local collaboration with local businesses. Can't say enough about how we've been able to collaborate with Ashley Furniture. And that's not in a small part. That's not a small part. It's a large part by how Mike has connected with the local businesses, and Lance and Barry. We try to continue to do that, but they've been outstanding and with us. And if nothing else, one of the things that have happened, and Mike put it in a little bit in the chat, but the school districts and Ashley Furniture spent tons of time learning more about what it would be to collaborate. And they actually purchased or built a mobile skills lab that goes around to all 4 school districts. That's a $1.5 million investment, and not in addition, about another $1.5 million just to actually learn more about it, something that we couldn't do by ourselves. We have incredible partnerships, and maybe Mike will tap into that if I get done with this, partnerships with the youth apprenticeships in the area. We have tons of career pathways going on with our businesses throughout. And if you look at our state report card, that actually shows there, because they show the state at like 1 or 2%. And I'm sure everybody else got that, but we're like 15% because our kids are working in the industry. That's super. As Mike alluded to and Lance alluded to, we have career tech departments focused on more structured pathways. Myself included, little old Blair Taylor could only do so much in the tech ed area, but now if we want to get high level welding and transcripted welding, they come to Blair Taylor. We go to Auto for Arcadia, construction, we go to Whitehall. Health services, we have that area. Early childhood now, where we can get at much of a higher level. Culinary is incredible. You want to do hospitality, get to Whitehall. They have 2 stainless steel kitchens right now that are working with with an outstanding instructor. But you know, incredible collaboration with those courses. And when you really think about it, all we're doing is what's best for kids. And if they get an opportunity to do more and get transcripted credits, and they learn more about what they're doing with academic career planning, that's where we want to be. Students are able to take now higher level courses within. We always could take higher level courses when we went out for distance learning because we had that opportunity forever. But now Blair Taylor has Math 108, transcript, not transcripted, right through the college, history through other school districts, sociology in itself. So kids can take them here, and nothing's better than knowing your instructor. So an instructor doesn't have to be from a distance and you just do it. Our instructor or Whitehall's instructor can come right over to Blair Taylor and talk to the kids if there's issues or concerns. We're close, they know it, it's connected. Professional development, and I don't know how much time I have. 5 minutes left. Professional development, we, instead of going to the Minneapolis for a professional PLC Institute, we brought it here. We had it in our school district, and we brought a solution tree right in, and we had our own institute. Instead of spending the money on hotel rooms, let's do it here. And it was just incredible. As Lance said, we're definitely in the PLCs, college level courses. Holy cow, 1 minute left. Math departments are working together. They're actually, Lance already mentioned it, common assessments, pacing guides. Do I got challenges in here too that I'm supposed to put in 1 minute? All right, I'm gonna go through it. I think if you get down to challenges, it's always the communication challenge. Establishing the why in 4 separate school districts from a distance can be done, but we're 4 different people. Having a strategic plan is huge, but getting that relayed out well so everybody hears the same message again. Having collective commitments. If I could see any one of the big challenges we have is if we can get to a point where we see ourselves as one entity, even though we're 4 separate, and it's not their kids, it's our kids, now we'll be better off. So many times in the special ed arena, they would always say, hey, you know, that's the student over here. No, we are all our kids. And until we see ourselves that way, and that's what we're working towards, we're going to be able to grow even further and farther and help our whole region that we're in. So there you go. I'll stop there because I'm on time, and I'm sure we could talk about that forever. Lance, Mike, Barry, anything?
Thanks, Jeff. Matt, you want to take this one next on behalf of Itasca?
You bet. I kind of hit on a couple of these earlier in terms of successes and things that we've been able to do. I mentioned in 2005 creating that online school. One of the things we also ran into in 2010, and I liked it. Jeff mentioned this too, that why piece. We were running into kids that couldn't get classes. We were running into because of schedule. We were running into kids that couldn't get Spanish because there weren't enough teachers. So we had this compelling why, and that led us down a road, and that enabled us to invest in technology in different ways. And our technology infrastructure is centralized right now, and this is technical and kind of behind the walls, but it's saving our districts huge dollars too. So our phone systems are connected. I can 4-digit dial or 5-digit dial to any of the partner districts. It's not long distance. We share a voicemail system. It's all connected. Our security, all that stuff kind of runs. Our wireless all runs through the same big head end that sits in the high school here with a big backup generator that IASC purchased. So that was a really, I think, a cool thing. It ties us together like physically in a good way. We've shared curriculum and planning. We've done some shared professional development, like Jeff said, but we also, I think, took a lump early on with curriculum that was a good learning tool for our group. The superintendents, I think like Lance talked about, meet often, and Pat mentioned we meet often. We thought sharing a curriculum person would be a great idea. And so we all said, yeah, let's do that. And so we hired this curriculum person, and she showed up in our districts, and people in our districts were like, who are you and what do you mean here? Why should we? And so we did a terrible job at that point, really establishing the why, communicating it out to our districts, getting buy-in that this was an important thing for us to do. So we learned our lesson, we took our lumps and realized that we need to start with, a process that makes a lot of sense. And when we've done that, Lance mentioned calendar and bell schedule. Our districts had talked about bell schedules and calendars for a long time, and we never could get it done. And finally, when we said we're going to share these classes, and this is a huge barrier to sharing classes if we don't have calendar and bell schedule, we asked our principals to figure out a bell schedule, and they got in a room and banged it out in a couple hours. And it was just because they had a compelling why to do it. So encourage folks that are considering this or looking at it, like start with that, hammer that home. We have a really comprehensive career pathway program I mentioned. I'll put a link to that in the comments section. Huge buy-in from our business community. We don't have one big, business partner like Ashley. We have a lot of little ones. And our program starts in 9th grade with some exploration curricularly wise and leads to internships as seniors where they can earn credit. We've had kids get hired right out of their internships, or college be paid for by our business partners because they value it so much, and our business partners want more and more and more. And that's after years and years of our business community saying, you're not getting our kids ready for what we need them to be ready for. That changed that dynamic. So I'd encourage you to check out that link. Our early childhood program in the area is very, very well known because of its collaboration. We work really intently with Head Start. We have blended classrooms. We blend funding from the state, local, private, and Head Start together to create opportunities for early childhood. We share community ed. We have our special education cooperative runs through our co-op, and that's where this money piece is a little bit different. I think in general, what we've learned is that there are some things that will run through our collaborative, which means run right through the business part of our collaborative, and be governed sort of by our collaborative. And then there are some things we do that happen because of the collaborative. It might only involve 2 of the districts, but it's because of the relationships that we have, because we meet a lot, because we talk a lot. So it's not happening through the collaborative, it's happening because of those relationships. And I think some of the challenges are the same that Jeff mentioned. A lot of it's about mindset. It's not about technical pieces. It's not about logisticals. It's about how the kind of thinking that people are bringing, whether it's scarcity thinking, like there's only so much of X to go around, versus abundance thinking, where we just need to make the pie bigger. Our communities, and I think I heard this from the guys in Wisconsin too, our communities here don't think about, well, this is a Grand Rapids graduate or a Northland graduate or a Greenway graduate. They're just looking at this applicant going, I want the best candidate. And so raising that bar for all of our kids, for all of our graduates, regardless of zip code, is what we're really trying to do, because our employers don't care. They just want really, really good workers. Our colleges want really, really good students, and we want to do that no matter what school a kid graduates from.
Excellent. Okay, thanks, Matt. We're going to pivot next to our question about impact. And so the question is as follows. What evidence is there to show your collaborative's impact? How do you know that what you're doing is working? And what kinds of data would you need in order to better answer this question? So we've heard a little bit about this. I guess, Matt, you're gonna remain in the chair to continue on with the response, and we'll follow up with Barry on behalf of Trempealeau.
All right. I think one of the examples, and really it's about, this is an example not so much about impact, but about relationships. So our Invest Early collaborative that I just mentioned before, it involves 4 of the 7 school districts. They've had impact in some of the others in some training and things like that. But I just want to give an illustration of what collaboration means. Recently, Head Start Federal came out with their vaccination requirement. And it says that if you are a contractor or a whatever, you have to comply with that same Head Start rule. And in many cases where schools and Head Starts were working together, the school district said, sorry, we're out. We're not going to do that. Our collaborative came together and said, we've been working together for 17 years. We're going to figure this out. And that meant that school districts had to do some things with their own staff that were hard. Like we're gonna implement the Head Start standard, even though that currently isn't a requirement of the school district or anywhere else, because it's the right thing to do, and because Head Start is our partner and they've been here for a long, long time. We've learned the difference between coordinating and where it's just sort of like, this is your schedule and this is our schedule, and do that, and we do some of that. That's important. But collaboration, this idea where as a district, I might not get anything out of this right now, but I'm going to go along with this because it's best for the group. And eventually it's going to be better for our students too, or it's going to be better for our region. Putting aside our own self-interests, we have them, making sure people understand what our self-interests are as an individual. At the end of the day, every one of the superintendents on this call answers to a school board back in their own district. So we can't pretend that there aren't self-interests involved, but it's important that as a group, everybody knows what those are. So we bring those to the table, put those out there. And so I know that if there's a decision that's made that's going to put Pat in a real bind and make it really hard for his district or his board to be supportive, I have to rethink that and look for a different way through that problem. I mentioned career pathways. That program is expanding. We've been really intentional about growing that. We've seen places where they throw out 1 million different career academies and pathways and We've been intentional about when are we going to even have one? And it's going to be when we have business interest, demonstrated workforce need, local engagement with students and staff. We have a champion involved. We have a way to measure growth and improvement. And so we've taken a slow and steady approach to that. We've grown from 4 pathways to 6. We've got a few more on our roadmap, but our business community is loving that. I mentioned that before. They want more and more and more. Our economic development people want to be involved and are jumping in. And we, like our partners in Wisconsin, we have students that are going between schools now, taking classes somewhere else because that school district's better able to provide that opportunity. And that's something our community is not even necessarily aware that it's happening, but it's just about, opportunities for kids. I know we have a short time here, but I want to just hammer again on the importance of relationships and trust. It's key. You can see the relationship that the group in Wisconsin has and the trust they have, how important that is. And again, starting with purpose, starting with why, being clear about that before you jump into anything. I think when we've missed those 2 things, we've struggled. And I think one of our biggest challenges along the way is how do we make sure that this information, these decisions, that the process involves the people closest to the work, like our teachers, so that we're not just surprising them and saying, hey, these superintendents and board members had this great idea. They really have to be involved in some way. I'll turn it over to Bari.
Great, thank you. And again, I just want to reiterate a lot of the same impacts that Matt stated also are happening here in our collaborative effort. And again, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Bari Schmidt. I'm the district administrator and a high school principal for the independent school district, small district here. So this is my 37th year here, and officially, I believe it's going to be my last year for the district. I was 4 years as a middle school, high school principal, and then this is my 7th year as the district administrator principal. Being a longtime math and computer science teacher, I like to look at objective data and numbers. So I'm going to kind of focus our impact on some of that data. When we started this, we said, we want to offer opportunities for our students that each school district could not do on its own. Again, being such the smallest district in the co-op, we definitely face that challenges. So that impact has been tremendous for us to be able to go to other schools and take courses where we wouldn't be able to offer it here. But the other thing we looked at with our partnerships and just it was the labor market projections and what we needed in this area to keep one of our goals is regional stability. So we saw that we needed more people for manufacturing and for the skills and trades. So our focus kind of initially went into some of the CTE areas, and I think that has paid off significantly. So just some data here. Over the last 4 years, students pursuing engineering design fields in 2018, and put this in context, we have about 200 to 250 students who graduate a year from our 4 schools. So we had 1 of those students in 2018, 4 in 2019, 11 in 2020, and 7 in 2021. Pursuing, sorry about this announcement. Students pursuing IT fields, we had none in 2018, 3 in 2019, 7 in 2020, and 2 in this last year. The skills trades fields have increased since 2018. We had 8, 16 and 19, 15 and 20, and 18 and 21. Healthcare, we had 12 each in both 18 and 19. We had 22 in 2020 and 18 in 2020. Then also we realized that, our focus is no longer on just preparing students for 4 years universities. So our enrollments, like in WTC, one of our partners there, we only had 27 students enrolling in 2018. That went up to 37 in 2019, 61 in 2020, and I think last year we had 38. And in CVTC, Chippewa Valley Technical College, which is north of us here, 16 in 2018, 26 in 19, 22 in 2020, and 32 in 2021. The Mobile Skills Lab has also opened up some tremendous opportunities for our students. Last year, we had 113 industry recognized certifications out of our class of 2021, 113. Now that some students get more than 1 certification. Our partnerships, I know Matt talked about, or maybe it was Pat, about partnering with smaller business. Well, we kind of do that through our youth apprenticeship program. We have 57 youth apprenticeships in 2021, and currently this year we have 48. And just the opportunity to share students and classes. We got maybe 900 to 950 students in our high schools between the districts right now. Over 300 of them take a course by another school. And the biggest thing I'd like to say of the impact of our collaboration, the biggest thing I'd like to say is the collaborative effort of last year to get through the pandemic and keep our 4 schools open and in person for the entire school year. Couple brief stints maybe where we did have some spikes in cases and lose some staffing short, but we had the same procedures basically from district to district, and we didn't stab each other in the back, and it was tremendous. And I'm sure our school report cards, which are all good in every district right now, are even going to be better because of that collaborative effort. So if I want to thank any of my colleagues for anything, that collaborative effort last year was outstanding. So thank you.
Excellent. Okay, thanks, Barry. So our last question for our superintendent panelists on behalf of their collaboratives is just the what's next question. What do you see? Where do you see your work going over the next few years? So I think we'll start with on the behalf of the Trempolo group. Mike and/or Lance, do you want to kick off with that one? What's next?
Yeah, we're both going to kind of bounce back and forth here, but I'll kind of kick it off. One of the biggest things we're working on right now is what we've labeled as the K-20 program. And what we're really saying is kindergarten through 20-year-olds. And as we've highlighted already, one of the good partnerships or great partnerships we have is with Western Technical College, which its home base is located in La Crosse. but they have satellite campuses and buildings, one of which is actually located in Independence. And so we're really looking at turning that into almost a career and technical center, where we're going to be adding some equipment. Eventually, Western will cover the cost of modifying some of those rooms, adding additional equipment. We're working with organizations like Lab Midwest and working with organizations, again, like Ashley Furniture Industries to do some of that work. And we're looking at really creating a situation where kids can begin to work towards industry certifications, technical diplomas, and partial or all of an associate's degree while they're still in high school. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the chat to everyone a link to a spreadsheet that shows an electromechanical pathway, as well as a mechatronics and robotic and engineering technician pathway. These are pathways that we've worked on for quite a while now with Western Technical College and have developed so that kids can begin taking courses while they're freshmen in high school and can work their way towards an associate's degree. And that'll eventually lead beyond that. And I'll turn it over to Mike to talk a little bit more about that and some of the beyond the associate's degree pieces.
And I think, thanks, Lance. I think the maybe the biggest thing we're trying to continue to really push forward on is depth has come up several times during the presentation today, is continuing to change what education looks like. We cannot continue down the same path that we have always been on, especially in rural America when we have employers. We've talked a lot about it. We've talked a lot about Ashley. We have 4 international employers, or national or international employers, in our school districts, between our 4 school districts. And if we continue to wait and be perfect in terms of what we provide for educational opportunities and preparation, that can't happen. So as Lance said, the K-20 work is taking a different look at things, certificates, certifications, advanced training to allow kids, and then force, maybe is a good word, the institutions and the employers, quite frankly, to recognize things differently. Is we spend a lot of time, and as I put in the chat, and what I'm sure we'll handle again in the question and answer period, we traveled all over the country looking at different schools. We traveled all over the world, compliments of Ashley. And one thing that we continue to do in this country is we continue to limit our kids. One thing we saw over and over again outside this country is it was about what kids what was possible for them. We limit them. We tell them continually what they can't do. So as we build this K-20 piece, you know, Lance mentioned the mechatronics, the robotics. We're jumping into a student-run 3D printing business. Those types of things, again, most of which we could never come close to funding. So we have the industry partner piece to help us with that. But our work, I think the depth of it is continuing to change the overall structure and the overall vision of education. We need our kids to understand what they're capable of, not what they're limited by because of the system that has been put in place for whatever reason.
Yeah, and I guess I would just add a piece to that. One of the things that, and I'm sure, you know, the Minnesota group probably runs into this, and many schools across the country do, is the Higher Learning Commission. That really is what controls who can teach courses at the college level to be able to offer the college credit. We've worked very closely with Western on what those certifications need to be. And through their work along with us, we've discovered that there are industry credentials that our teachers can test through that allows them to be Higher Learning Commission certified in order to teach those dual credit courses, which is pretty cool. The other thing that we've done is the 4 school districts in collaboration have said we are willing to pay the tuition costs of somebody who is pursuing a master's degree in a content area in order to meet Higher Learning Commission criteria. So we're looking beyond the doors of our respective high schools, and we're looking to what is it that our teachers need in order to give our kids what they need to go back to that mission where they can have a world-class education in rural West Central Wisconsin to be competitive, not only here, but across the state, across the nation, and around the world. So I think it's just important to know that what we're trying to do is stretch beyond the walls of our districts and really stretch to the depths of what our kids need to have opportunities across the world to be in a competitive market.
Excellent. Thank you, Lance. Thanks, Mike. Pat, you want to speak for a little bit about what's next for you?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I'm just humbled when I had a little neat little presentation I was going to do here, and every time Wisconsin talks, I decided that I don't need to go overseas to see what's going on there. I'm just going to go across the border and come visit you guys, because it's just amazing the things that you're talking about. And I've even been texting Matt saying, "Hey, how about this? How about this?" It's been fun, but I'll get right to the point. I'm going to look at it a little more broad about what I think where we're heading. I think the first thing I'll start with was just I'll touch real quick that we as SUPS, we spent a lot of time talking about where we thought we should go the last couple of years. And then one of our major funding partners sort of called us in and said, okay, you know, the landscape's about to change here. And what are you going to do with that? So that put us in a different mindset of what we needed to do. So when we did our operational strategic plan, I wanted it really open-ended to see what really truly was going to come out of this. And what we found out was the districts valued our IAS collaborative because they very easily, in listening sessions and any other way, they could have very easily communicated each board member, because the board members were talked to, some teachers were talked to, administrators were talked to, administrative support teams, anybody that touched the collaborative or even knew about it had an opportunity to weigh in on whether they thought this thing was even going to be relevant or not. And in the end, everybody said we need it. And not only do we need it, we want it to grow and we want it to stabilize and all those things. So when I think about where this thing is going in the future, and when I'm done talking, I want Matt to weigh in if I missed anything. But that was the first thing I think was, for me, I was really happy that that's the way the strategic plan, that was the story that it told. Because even in our meeting last night, everybody started using that sort of common language as we need this. We want this collaboration. We need this collaboration. And then they started saying things like, and we needed to do boom, 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 boom. So one of the things that I guess I would say is the first step for us is, again, to get an executive director that's devoted to IASC. The second thing is we've sort of got these 4 pillars, and the pillars were technology, early childhood, career pathways. And I love everything that Wisconsin was talking about here about career pathways, because those are the kind of things we're trying to do in our collaborative as well. Special education is a big part of that, but was to try to figure out a way to build capacity in those programs so that we don't necessarily maybe need these major funding sources to keep these things relevant. The second thing that I think is part of this is also listening to what our districts around us, my including, are saying we need. You know, we need somebody, we need HR, we need a level 4 program, we need curriculum director. And it's funny because Matt talked about that a second ago, but it's sort of like coming back around again as something maybe the schools need. And maybe this time, because it's coming from a different direction, maybe it'll have some roots that maybe top down versus from the side or from the bottom. Any other shared services, we look at like gifted and talented programs or Knowledge Bowl or anything like that our schools all kind of do separately someplace else. That might be something we pull together. We already do a course catalog, you know, professional development, all these cool things that I think that could happen when we start, when somebody's in that position to really pull it together. But building capacity financially, and then 2 more things I'll mention. Yesterday, Matt and I had that same conversation. We're sitting in his office, and the question was, what would you change in education if you could? Like, what is the one thing that we would be changing if we had the power to do that? So that was really fun, because that's essentially what you were just talking about right now, changing the landscape, changing what it looks like. But I also think that it's going to be really important to, and this is new to me, other people on this call might be more active with legislators, but I think our executive director and our IAS piece is going to have to engage more with legislators. Matt talked to me about this yesterday, and we've talked about things that are already in legislation, tools that maybe we haven't dipped into that we could use. but also just when school districts like ours do start to work together, there should be some kind of opportunity, incentive, reward. I don't even know how to say it. That when groups do get together and start thinking regionally about all our kids, somewhere along the line, there should be a financial reward or some kind of benefit to be able to do that. Because in the end, you're right, we are kind of bearing the costs ourselves in these areas. And I think that's all I had. Matt, did you want to take a second and just share your vision of where you think our group is going?
Well, I don't want to budge into Wisconsin's time. I have, a comment about just our depth and having to do with teacher and educator positional shortages that we're all seeing in education, including superintendents. And we don't have deep depth charts, even in a district my size with 4,000 people. And turnover happens, turnover is real, and we can't let that turnover create problems for us. And so the more we're working regionally and thinking about staffing differently, I think we can create strength and sustainability despite turnover. So I'm going to leave it at that, but we can dig into that later during Q&A if somebody's curious.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. For the last part of our discussion here, facilitated discussion, I want to turn to first, so again, thank you to our superintendents on behalf of their two collaboratives. I want to turn next to the two directors of the State Rural Education Associations to offer a discussant perspective. What have you heard that resonates with you? What do you see in terms of the future for rural collaboratives? Anything that you can, recommendations policy-wise. So let's see, Bob, you want to go first on behalf of the Minnesota Rural Education Association?
Yeah, I just wanted to first thank the superintendents on this call for their strong leadership, because without their vision, this just doesn't happen. I looked at some statistics in Minnesota just to give you a snapshot from the Center for Rural Policy and Development. Minnesota rural communities experienced the following two things in 2021. Population growth in greater Minnesota is concentrated in large metropolitan designated counties and micropolitan cities, meaning the bigger cities in rural Minnesota are seeing population growth for the most part. And the second thing is most urban areas in the state, including the Twin Cities, have seen significant increase in annual population gains. So what this means to me is most of my districts are probably seeing declining enrollment. So in rural Minnesota, we're seeing declining enrollment, we're seeing funding inequities, and we're seeing staff shortages. And this is creating situations where districts can no longer make it efficiently on their own. The necessity of districts getting out of the mindset of competing for students and now focusing on how they can share resources together to provide more opportunities for their students is happening more in the state of Minnesota. There are several ways in Minnesota that districts are doing this. You know, some of the classic ways that we talked about: service cooperatives, special ed cooperatives, ed districts. But as you've seen today, we are branching out beyond this and working together cooperatively and collaboratively at a local and regional level to fill services that they cannot do on their own. This makes sense from a fiscal viewpoint, but it also enhances rural education by providing more opportunities for our students. Working together, districts become stronger. I don't know if you noticed this, but we're talking about two programs here, but if you listen to Pat is the superintendent of two separate districts, right? Well, that's just a separate thing we could talk about, is staffing and sharing of sports programs and things like that. Policy-wise, at a state level, districts just need more flexibility to allow collaboration to happen. Pat talked a little bit about money, and there probably is seed money that is needed to make these types of programs a reality. As we heard, it could come from businesses, it could come from the school districts, or it could come legislatively. And then probably the last thing I want to point out is it just takes strong leadership and people with vision to put this together. And I think today you heard that it can happen. these superintendents made it happen. So those are my comments today.
Excellent. Thank you, Bob. Kim Cockle, Executive Director of the Wisconsin Rural Schools Alliance, offer a couple of comments here.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And Bob, thank you so much. And also thank you to the panelists. You guys did a great job, and I'm so impressed with your creativity and ability to work together. So thank you for your work. As Bob said, in Wisconsin, we're kind of facing the same thing: declining enrollments, lack of funding in many cases for our rural districts, teacher and administrative shortages. I was just looking this morning. I know just within our membership, I think we're up to close to 20 superintendent jobs that are open already. And then I heard Barry say that he might be going at the end of the year. So, trying to find quality people to fill those positions is going to be difficult. I think another piece that we find in Wisconsin is the broadband issue, and I'm sure it's also there in Minnesota. And, I think our co-op here, with Mike, Lance, Barry, and Jeff, having the advantage of having like Ashley and some of those, but some of our other areas of the state have lost a lot of those businesses because of the lack of broadband and the lack of logistics. So that's made some real issues. So I think anything we can do with broadband, and this is kind of the legislative part, is get more, everybody connected so we can bring some of these businesses back out to help support our communities and our schools. The co-op model that the 4 schools here in Wisconsin have put together, and the schools up in Minnesota are great. In Wisconsin, where I've actually talked to our DPI state superintendent, Dr. Underly, of looking at using the Trumbull co-op as a model for other districts. We have a lot of legislators here that want to keep pushing consolidation, and we know what consolidation can do to some of our rural districts. And this co-op model, in my mind, has allowed these districts to continue to provide quality education for their students and still keep their identities. And that's what I like about the model. I think it also has allowed them to provide, quality programming. And I think that was brought out with the 66 dual credit courses and the 113 industry certified certificates that are being given out. Our kids are well prepared. And what really bothers me in the state of Wisconsin is a lot of our rural districts do well in the state report cards, but the state report cards really don't tell the true message, because a lot of these questions aren't even asked. And, and it's things like, the dual credit courses, those industry certifications that really make our quality schools out in the rural areas. I think the other thing when it comes to the legislative, Pat, you brought it up in Minnesota. It's the same thing here in Wisconsin. We should find a way to help fund some of these great programs. We almost had a shared services piece go through the budget in 2017. It got cut at the very end. The only thing I didn't like about it, it wasn't going to involve schools that would already took the step, like the Trumbull Valley Cooperative. They weren't going to grandfather them in. That really bothered me. Here are people that really, stuck their necks out there to do the right thing. So getting our legislators to understand that, these pilot programs are great, and they need to, if funding comes forward, they need to be included in it. I know HLC came up, and I know we've run into problems on dual credits back when I was an administrator too. And I think the HLC needs to step back and see what's really going on and change some of their ways also. And then in the state of Wisconsin, we need to get the WMC on board with education. Right now, the only time they come to us is if they need something. If we need something, they're not very helpful. And let's see, I've got just a minute left here. Again, I think this is just a great example of the creativity of our rural districts and their willingness to do what's right for our students out in the rural areas. And I applaud all of you. And, Mike, your comment that you made, we need to be more forward thinking and less limiting of our young people, because they're very creative. I see what my grandkids are doing now in early stages, and it's like they're light years ahead of where I was in kindergarten and first grade. So, we got to continue to promote that, let them grow and let them blossom. So thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. And, again, thank you so much for your leadership, gentlemen.
Excellent. Let's see, Molly, I know we are almost at time. How are we doing with we might have time for one question if it hasn't been addressed?
I'm not sure. We just have 2 minutes left, so we would end up going over. I would love to direct people towards the chat and our survey where you could help give us some feedback on how we can continue to improve our webinars in the future. And maybe if our panelists have any interest in quickly visiting, there is one question there. Is there anything your state agencies, either with the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction or the Minnesota Department of Education, are doing or could do to support your collaborative efforts? I know Kim just touched on that and some ways that Wisconsin DPI could better support our collaboratives or are providing some support. But if any of our other panelists have other responses that they'd be willing to type in, that would be amazing.
And then the last thing I would add too would be, Bree, if you can just put up, since we are rapidly approaching our time, if you could, we could just put up the contact information for our panelists here at the top of the Region 10 Comprehensive Center. There's our website, and the 2 rural advocacy organizations are there, and the websites for the 2 cooperatives as well. So I think with that in mind, we are probably about at our time here. I want to just echo what Kim and Bob had said in their discussion. Thank you so much to all of our panelists, our superintendents, for the great work that you're doing, for the great examples that you're providing. Hopefully those you'll hear some from, you'll get some contact from folks who were on today's webinar with some questions. Very encouraging to hear about opportunities that you can continue to learn from each other. And thank you again to our 2 discussants, Bob and Kim, and for your work advocating on behalf of rural schools in our 2 states. So with that in mind, I believe we are right about at 10:30. We could, I think, probably spend another hour, if not more, on this topic. Again, huge thank you to all of our panelists and our discussants. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Stay safe, and look for more opportunities from the Comp Center for more webinars coming up in the future, including on rural topics of rural education. Thank you, everyone.